They say every family has its secrets. But what if the secret wasn't a quiet disagreement or a forgotten betrayal? What if it was something darker? Something that sat beneath a legacy so revered, so applauded, that speaking it aloud felt like sacrilege? What if the man who helped shape American comedy, who directed some of the most beloved films of our time, was also the man you feared most in your own home? What if he was your father? And what if he wasn't? Tracy Reiner's voice didn't break when she said it. There was no visible tremor in her hands, no dramatic tears, just stillness. That kind of stillness that only comes when you've carried a truth for far too long. When you've tried to leave it behind, bury it under success, motherhood, aging, but it keeps finding its way back. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Her words, now echoing across the industry, across newsrooms, across dinner tables, are simple, but they're also unforgivable. He forced himself on me, she said. Not once, multiple times. And that man is Rob Reiner, her adoptive father, her protector, her nightmare. So how did we get here? How did we go from heartwarming stories of a blended Hollywood family, Rob and his wife Michelle raising Penny Marshall's daughter as their own, to a brutal double homicide, an arrest, and a statement so damning it fractured generations of loyalty in a single breath? That's what this story is about. Not just the violence in Brentwood, or the unraveling of a household that once symbolized the golden age of liberal, loving Hollywood, but the layers beneath it, the years of silence, the whispered therapy sessions, the buried documents, and yes, the chilling words of their youngest daughter, Romy, who may have known far more than anyone realized. Because this isn't just a Hollywood downfall. This is a story about power, about proximity, about the illusion of safety, and what happens when the very person who's supposed to protect you is the one you need protecting from. And no one saw it coming. Or did they? Let's take a moment to pull back. Set the stage. Because to understand how deep this fracture runs, we need to understand what this family looked like to the world, and what it tried so desperately to hide from itself. Rob Reiner, son of Carl Reiner, another towering figure of Hollywood's golden age. He practically grew up on studio lots, wandering through sound stages the way most kids wander a neighborhood park. He was the funny one, the clever one, the one who always had a comeback. Then came All in the Family. Then came Spinal Tap, Stand By Me, The Princess Bride, When Harry Met Sally. A string of hits that didn't just entertain, they defined entire decades. He wasn't just in Hollywood. He was Hollywood. And through it all, he had a family. A beautiful wife, Michelle. Children. A blended family, they called it. Tracy, his wife's daughter from a previous relationship, whom he raised as his own. Nick, his biological son. A young man who struggled openly with addiction and later found his voice in writing. Romy, the youngest, camera-shy, thoughtful, protective. Photos from the early 2000s show them all smiling together. Red carpet events, charity galas, behind-the-scenes shots of cozy dinners and Malibu vacations. But now we know, those pictures weren't the full story. Not even close. Because in February of this year, the facade shattered. And it didn't crack quietly. It bled. Police were called to the Reiners' $13.5 million estate in Brentwood, one of those gated, ivy-laced properties just a few blocks from where O.J. Simpson's saga first unraveled. The officers found the bodies of Rob and Michelle in the main house. Stab wounds. Multiple. Defensive injuries. Signs of struggle. It was Romy who found them. 27 years old. The quiet one. She called 911. She told the dispatcher there had been a terrible fight. But in the days that followed, reports emerged that she said something else. Something that would later echo louder than even Tracy's statement. There's someone in this family who should be a suspect. She didn't name names in that first report, but she didn't have to, because the suspect was found in the guest house. Nick, Rob and Michelle's son, 32 years old, screenwriter, recovering addict, living just a few feet from the place his parents died. He was arrested that night, charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. But here's the thing. Even as Nick's face was splashed across headlines and social media, even as friends and former colleagues weighed in on his mental state, his past, his temper, there was something else simmering underneath. Whispers. Not about Nick. But about Rob, and about Tracy, and those whispers? They had been there for years. We just didn't hear them. Or maybe we did, but we didn't listen. There was the 1996 psychiatric incident. Never officially reported. Buried in insurance paperwork. And the therapy logs, redacted, muffled by legal fog, but still whispering things like power imbalance, inappropriate contact, and one chilling line. Father figure not safe. There were the stories from former assistants. Bits of unease. Tension at home. Doors that shouldn't have been locked. Tracy's abrupt withdrawal from several roles in the early 2000s. Always explained as creative differences or fatigue. And then there was the voicemail. That lost, recovered, then legally silenced voicemail. A voicemail Tracy allegedly left for Michelle in 2009. A voicemail that sources claim changed the way Michelle looked at Rob forever. But it wasn't admissible in court. And it wasn't public. Until now. Because when Tracy made her statement just weeks after the double homicide, she didn't just accuse Rob Reiner of unspeakable abuse. She accused Hollywood of complicity. She accused us of not looking closely enough. Of letting charisma, talent, legacy bury the truth. So the question isn't just, did Rob Reiner do what Tracy claims? The question is, why didn't we ask earlier? Why didn't we notice that the daughter he claimed to love so fiercely kept disappearing from his life? Why didn't we ask why Romy was always guarded around him? Why didn't anyone say anything when Nick, during a rehab interview in 2017, muttered, "Sometimes I feel like I'm the only one who remembers what happened." We thought he meant addiction, withdrawal. But now everything feels different. Everything feels wrong. And the more we uncover, the more chilling the silence becomes. Because there's still so much we don't know. And what we do know doesn't fit together cleanly. It wasn't just one accusation. It wasn't just one victim. And the question that haunts every frame of this story is one that no press release, no lawyer, no studio can answer. Who else knew? And what did they do to stop it? If anything, in this expose, we will go deeper than headlines. Past the shock, past the press statements, past the legal language. We're going to look at who Rob Reiner was, and who he may have always been. We'll examine the psychiatric files, the insider interviews, the legal letters, the conflicting statements, the voice messages, the eerie social media clues, and yes, the silent, unflinching testimony of a daughter who says she has nothing left to lose. But before we go further, before we open that voicemail, that letter, those therapy files, you need to understand something. This story doesn't have a satisfying resolution. Not yet. Because the moment you think you understand who the villain is, another door opens. Another silence cracks. And what's behind it? Well, that's what we're about to find out. Because while the world is busy asking if Nick Reiner killed his parents, Tracy Reiner is asking something far more dangerous. She's asking us to remember, to listen, and to finally believe. But what she reveals next, in her own words, will change everything. And it begins in a small, gray office, on a rainy Tuesday in 1996, with a single word scribbled on a therapist's intake form. Unsafe. That was the word. Just one. But enough to open a door that had stayed shut for decades. And behind that door wasn't a stranger. It was Rob Reiner, Hollywood icon, director, actor, activist, father, the man whose laugh filled sitcoms, whose films brought people together, whose name was synonymous with liberal ideals, progressive values, justice. And yet, Tracy Reiner's truth doesn't align with any of that, which raises the uncomfortable question we keep circling. How much of Rob Reiner's public persona was just that? Public? And how much did we really know about the man behind the camera? Let's rewind for a moment. Not to soften the blow, but to understand the power at play. Rob wasn't just some actor turned director. He was Hollywood royalty, literally born into it. His father, Carl Reiner, was a pioneer, part of the golden age of television, a genius of sketch comedy, a collaborator with Mel Brooks. Carl helped shape the blueprint of what American comedy was. Rob grew up in that world. Not outside looking in, but deep in the heart of it. Stage sets were his playground. Writers' rooms were his classrooms. And when he stepped into the spotlight himself, it was seamless, effortless. He became meathead on All in the Family, the loud, opinionated liberal son-in-law who clashed with Archie Bunker. It wasn't just a role. It became his identity. The progressive truth teller. the moral compass. But here's the contradiction. The louder Rob got about justice in the public sphere, the more invisible his private world became. That's not an accident. It's a shield. It always is. Think about it. Rob wasn't just a director. He was a cause. He was the guy at rallies. He was in documentaries about corruption, voter suppression, Trump, censorship. He fought the good fight, and most of us applauded. Because we like our heroes loud. We just don't like looking too closely at where they go when the crowd clears. So while Rob was winning awards for A Few Good Men and The American President, something else was happening back home. Tracy. Let's not pretend this is simple. Tracy Reiner is Penny Marshall's daughter, born in 1964. And when Penny and Rob were together, Rob adopted Tracy and raised her as his own. On paper, it was beautiful. The headlines wrote themselves. Hollywood's modern family. Blended and strong. Rob himself said once in an interview, Tracy's mine. Period. No asterisk. But if you listen closely to the tapes, watch the interviews, there's a strange emotional detachment in the way he talks about her. Affectionate, yes, but also distant. Controlled. Like someone trying to remember what warmth is supposed to sound like. Tracy, on the other hand, rarely spoke of Rob publicly. When she did, it was brief. Guarded. People chalked it up to privacy. To being a low-key personality. Not everyone wants the spotlight. Except, Tracy grew up in the spotlight. She was in a league of their own. When Harry met Sally, pretty woman, she wasn't hiding from attention. She was hiding from something else. Now let's talk about that silence. Because the truth is, Tracy has been saying something for years. Just not loud enough for us to hear. Or maybe, we just weren't listening. In 2002, she left a project halfway through production. No public statement. The crew was told she was overwhelmed and needed to regroup. A year later, she stopped acting altogether. People close to her said she moved out of LA briefly, lived in New Mexico for a while, got involved in small-town theater. No press, no fanfare. What happened? What was she escaping? There's a theory, and we'll get to the documents later. But for now, here's what we know. Around the same time Tracy vanished from the industry, Rob's production company began quietly altering its internal personnel. One longtime assistant was let go. Another longtime housekeeper reportedly disappeared overnight. No explanation, no forwarding contact. You start to see patterns. Not proof, but smoke. And where there's smoke, let's rewind a bit more. Back to the 80s. Back to a house in Malibu where Rob, Michelle, and the kids lived during Rob's prime. Visitors at the time described it as tight-knit, warm, a sanctuary. But one visitor, a fellow director's assistant, later recalled something different. She said, I remember Tracy never spoke when Rob entered the room. Never. It was like someone flipped a switch in her. At the time, that didn't register. Because again, Rob was the good guy. Everyone wanted to believe that. But imagine being a child in that space. A teenager, trying to speak a truth that no one is prepared to hear. How do you begin that sentence? How do you survive it? That's the shadow Tracy has been walking in for most of her life. Now, some people will argue, why now? Why speak up now? It's a fair question. But also is it? Would you have listened 5 years ago? 10. Would the media have believed her over Rob Reiner? The director, the activist, the icon? Would you? It's easier now, isn't it? Now that the man is gone. Now that his son is in custody. Now that everything's broken. But bravery doesn't always arrive on schedule. Sometimes it crawls out of a wreckage. And that's where Tracy is right now. Not performing. Not seeking revenge. Just standing inside the wreckage of her family, holding what's left of the truth. And let's not forget, Rob wasn't just a father to Tracy. He had other children, other lives woven into his. Nick, Romy. And yet, in all the years of press, interviews, family coverage, Tracy's name appears the least. Almost as if someone was gradually erasing her, keeping her at the edge of the frame, but not quite out of sight. Why? What was Rob afraid of? Let's talk about that for a second. Rob Reiner built a reputation, not just a career, a carefully curated identity, the moral man in a broken system, the voice of reason in a chaotic industry. But reputations, when built too perfectly, become cages. Because the higher we lift someone, the harder we fall when they betray us. And that's what this feels like. A betrayal of trust, of fatherhood, of the idea that some people are safe. But if Rob Reiner wasn't safe, then who is? That's the question Tracy forces us to ask. And it's one most people don't want to answer. Because it doesn't just make us question Rob. It makes us question ourselves, our instincts, our heroes, our willingness to look away. It's not comfortable. And it's not meant to be. This isn't a scandal. It's a reckoning. And we're just getting started. Because everything you think you know about this family is about to unravel. And the first thread? It starts in a therapy office. A thin manila folder. A few scribbled notes. And one name redacted in black ink. A name we now believe was Nick's.